So I'm Blake Marques Carrington. I'm an artist based in New York City, and I'm also an associate professor at Pratt Institute, and also the coordinator of the Art and Technology program. So I've worked for a very long time, for over 25 years in combining art and technology. And I've also been teaching for almost 20 years, also at the college level, in various types of art and technology. So I'm here in Brazil right now for 3 months on a Fulbright fellowship. I won the Fulbright U.S. Scholar Awards. So I've been working with the students and faculty here at USP with the Grupo Pesquisa Realidades, doing the various activities with all of them, and trying to work on a new project, doing some other research until I go back to New York and resume my teaching duties in New York. Um, when I could start quite early with a personal journey, it makes sense. I mean, have been an artist since I was a child. Um, with technology, I really started around my teenage years. I was a teenager in the 90s, so my family first got a computer, and so I really got into drawing with MS Paint, making like digital copies of covers of books that I really loved. Um, and then playing with even the TV remote controller and doing like picture in picture and arranging different programs at the same time, almost like mixing audiovisual media like on my family's TV. So even before I started doing coding and things like that, I had an interest in that. Even though mostly I was doing paintings through my teenage years. In college, I started video art classes, so video art as well as electronic music. So at that point, I really got interested in mostly using things like After Effects to create more like video paintings. Still had a very like painterly style, but just using original music, using abstract video layers to create some sort of digital painting. And then finally, I got more into real-time stuff, performance. Um, as I've explained in some of the other lectures, I was sitting in like festivals, let's say, and seeing my work being projected and being in the audience. So just like a single channel video work being projected. And I felt this adrenaline of my heart beating just being in the audience. And that made me kind of want to actually perform and do more of a concert live with the same type of style. So that's when I really got into things like Maximus P and coding for live performance, audiovisual coding, which I'm still focusing on a lot today. Um, yeah, I guess personal journey. I played piano when I was a child for 5 years. Um, so I'd always had that interest in music, and that informs the way I approach it today. Um, I'm not I'm not a really good. I can't play piano. I'm not good with the traditional forms of music making. I have experimented with analog synths and analog music equipment, and of course, it's beautiful and wonderful. I have always been drawn to software side of things because it gives you flexibility. Um, I have lots of friends that are musicians, and they spend all of their money on these beautiful modular synth rigs, and I appreciate them, but also I'm always experimenting. And in my mind, I want to be able to take data from a website and have that create sound, or like my project with cathedral plans, other things like that. For me, I always needed software to create the music. So it always made sense for me. Everything has always been digital on a laptop with controllers also. Um, I would feel a little bit locked in place if I had a bigger, more expensive hardware setup, right? With analog, it's just electricity. You can make visuals or sound from electricity. With digital, it's just data. Um, so I think there's flexibility with that, with visual, with analog also. But I experiment a lot. I change things a lot. and the flexibility of not having to pay $1,000 to experiment with something new is important for me to have flexibility. As an artist, um, I've always been interested in combining art and technology. Um, I typically have done videos, performances, audiovisual performances, interactive installations. I release full-length music albums. I have a music moniker called Russian Arc Sakura. Um, I do paintings that are made with sound that also incorporate hand-drawn elements. So I've really explored a lot of different media. For me, the combination and choreography between visuals and sound has always been very important. And technology has been the language that I can use to translate those things. So it's always been a fabric that's connecting things for me, no matter if I'm doing a painting or an installation or a performance. Um, I find that the work can be very different. I even have done artist books. Um, so it is taking me, I think, a long time to find the connection between all of these different types of work. I think someone could see, if they could look at all of my work, you can see that that looks like a Blake work, no matter what it is. I just think that that's taken time for me to discover like how to do that. And absolutely, technology has been central to that exploration. So for me, like I said, I have considered myself an artist since I was a child. The teaching side of things, I guess it's important. My father was a teacher in high school, like social studies, and he always told me, don't be a teacher, because especially for lower levels, it's really a pain, I think, right? Um, but that was always in my mind. I knew that my father was a teacher. Uh, I was in college, and I did a study abroad program in Italy. Actually, in college, I studied Italian for 2 years. And then after school, I knew I didn't want to just go get a job somewhere. I wanted to focus on making art, but also I've always loved traveling, being overseas. I loved my summer in Italy. I'd visited other places in Europe before that. And so I was asking my professors and some people, like, do you think I could go teach English in Italy? Because I thought I could continue my Italian studies. And pretty much everyone said that's there's not really a program to do that. It's very hard. But there's this thing called the JET program in Japan, which stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching. So I looked into that, and it's a collaboration with the Japanese government and the American government. Um, and I got that opportunity. So I went to Japan. I lived there for 2 years, and I taught English in elementary schools and middle schools, and also a local community center for retired people. And it was in a very small town. No one spoke English. There was a rice field in front of my apartment. So that was an experience of, living on my own, being an artist. I was going to Tokyo every weekend and exhibiting work in Tokyo, collaborating with artists in Tokyo, but also teaching in a way that my father told me, like, never be a teacher. Teaching elementary students and middle school students. But of course, it was really fun. I was just teaching English. So that experience lasted 2 years. And because of that, when I started graduate school for my master's, my program was actually 3 years long, which is strange for American grad programs. My my professor, it's common for graduate students to actually teach in the United States. So this is related to another question, maybe. So my professor said, I think my second semester during my master's, my professor said, Blake, oh, you taught in Japan? Go teach this class. And with almost no preparation, I taught a multimedia, like a computer art multimedia course. And I was, I think, 26 years old and just very focused on my own studies. I feel bad for those students now, 'cause I know they paid a lot of money, but I had no idea what I was doing. But I taught 4 semesters, so 2 years in a row, as a master's student. And I improved a lot, but it was very difficult. It was very, very difficult. Um, so after that, yeah, after grad school, I did some residencies around the world. I lived in Helsinki for a few months. I lived in Montreal for a few months, Berlin. Um, when I finally moved to New York in 2009, my first job I got was with an English language school in Manhattan. 'Cause I had no job, I had no money, but I knew like, okay, my friends are in New York. I have to move to New York. And the easiest job I could get was with an English language school. So that was the first thing. And then my friend got me a job as a video technician at the Cooper Union, which is a really wonderful school. Famously has no tuition for students in Manhattan. So in the first maybe 3 months that I lived in New York, I got two kind of part-time jobs, one teaching English and one being more of a technician in a really great art school. I just did that. I think maybe 1 year after that, there was another school in the Upper East Side in Manhattan where someone that also went to my grad school, which was Syracuse University, someone was also teaching there. Another teacher got sick and was out for the whole semester, and they were struggling. They have to find someone to cover this class. It was, I think, just Photoshop, basics of Photoshop. And so they called me. It was in, I think, week 4 of the semester. The students had been watching videos for a whole month because they didn't have a teacher. And so I got in because it was an emergency for them. So that was my first proper teaching job in a college in New York. And so once I was there, just every semester, I built on that. I got another job at Brooklyn College. I started teaching in the foundation department at Pratt Institute, I think in 2011. So I moved to New York in 2009, and then until 2015, I had 4 or 5 jobs at all times, teaching in multiple universities, doing some design work on the side, some website design, just hustling, trying to pay rent. Um, and then I got lucky in 2015 and I got my current position with the digital arts department at Pratt, which is a full-time job. So I've been in that position for 10 years. I think it keeps me fresh, definitely. I'm forced to learn new things all the time. I think if I was by myself, maybe I would not feel as much motivation to keep learning all the new tools all the time. It's frustrating sometimes, but I think like if you were a painting professor, I imagine, I mean, I love painting still, but I imagine you don't have to keep learning new things every year, right? So I have students all the time that show me new tools, new techniques. I'm like, that's cool. And sometimes my students teach me. I also teach a pre-college course, which is 16-year-olds come to Pratt to get college credit. So these are high school students. Um, that's very different. It's great. It's more exhausting, definitely. Um, but for me, teaching is an important creative process. I feel like after I'm done teaching, I go home that day and I have more energy than when I started the day, if things went well. Sometimes I'm just tired and I need a nap. Um, so even if I had tons of money, even if I didn't have to work at all, I could be an artist full time. I would still like to teach one class a semester. I think it's good just for conversations, to keep in touch with other people, with younger people. Um, I don't want to become a dinosaur, content with my own ideas, right? So I always want to be changing my ideas in my practice. So I think teaching is the perfect place for that. Um, I've never worked a corporate job. I think for me it would be impossible if I had to go to an office 5 days a week. Like I couldn't last. I really need the time, the space. Having a teaching job has given me this time here. So I've been on sabbatical. So last I was teaching at Pratt was the fall semester, which ended in December of last year. So I haven't been teaching since then. I've had this great time and space to just focus on my creative work, to meet all of you guys. Um, so I don't think any other job could give you that, right? So a lot of our students are international. So just very clearly, sometimes I have half of my class are Chinese students. And I know even though they have a requirement for the English language to enroll into school, sometimes their English level might not be super high. So I'm more aware of that because of my time in Japan. Um, I think dealing with language, me having the experience of being in some new environment, trying to learn all of the rules of that environment, rules of a different language. I think it gives me more sympathy for students coming into my classroom. Um, even let's say that American students, maybe there's not a cultural problem, but it's but the proper classroom should not be a monolith anymore, right? It's not about me. It's about opening up the ideas for all of the students to feel encouraged to talk, to share their ideas. Um, and I think my experiences in Japan especially helped me just to understand, to be open, to kind of pull a little bit more, with students that if they need a little bit of help to do that. Uh, so it was a very, very formative time for me. So I have the liberty, because I'm now a coordinator of my program, I've been able to shape it in a certain way. I've written a lot of the curriculum, a lot of the syllabi for the classes. So really, in speaking specifically about music and sound arts, Pratt is famous. It's a great school for fine arts, for design, for fashion, for architecture, for animation. There really isn't any presence of music or sounds before I got there. So I have been one of the only professors at Pratt's that teach sound arts, that teach some kind of electronic music. And I think my department, digital arts, my program, art and technology, is the perfect place for that. A lot of the technologies that we use nowadays were developed in the music industry. Um, just the concept of signals of electricity, I think is nice to think about signals of digital data, right? So I think sound and music conceptually can be applied to digital technology in a way a little bit easier than even video and things. Some programs might have in the fine arts department, they have film video. Yeah, Pratt also, there's a department of film and video. And video, even if it's shot on digital, it's sometimes there's still the influence of Hollywood cinema, narrative cinema. But what we're using in the video that I've always created has more in connection with painting and with electronic music, right? It's not really narrative at all. So I think those things, I like to try to find the translations between all these different fields. To me, they don't seem like different fields. And even though I mentioned things like conceptual items, or we can think of many times classes are divided into conceptual classes or theoretical classes and technical classes or skills-based classes. And I've always felt that was a little, I don't know, I felt uncomfortable with that because to me, for example, learning processing, if you learn how to code, there's something like with any language, there's something highly conceptual just about the idea of using that, right? When I'm learning Portuguese, I feel like my brain is changing in a highly conceptual way, right? You're making new pathways, you're forming new ideas that were impossible before. And it's also a highly technical task, as is writing code, right? So I've always tried to shape my classes, shape our curriculum in a way that isn't so separating with these different things. So it's not really about video, it's not about sound, it's kind of like here's something that combines all of those things. I think that is more effective, and it just makes more sense nowadays. I don't think people really work in a really exclusive form, um, especially with my colleagues in 3D animation. So in my department, I'm the coordinator of art and technology. We also have 3D animation, 2D animation, and game arts now. Those other three programs are very industry focused. So our 3D animation students, they want to go work for Disney, they want to work for Pixar, right? So big movies, very like business industry oriented. And my colleagues that teach in the 3D program have always had stress. Okay, do we become a generalist program or a specialist program? Because the industry usually only hires specialists. Like you have to be really, really, really good at lighting. You have to be really, really good at rigging a character, right? If you're kind of good at all of those things, it's hard for you to get a job, right? But I'm glad, and what I do in art and technology, there's not as much of an industry pressure. So definitely, I've always been a generalist, and I think many of my students are also generalists. Like they like to try lots of different things. I love it when I get other students from other departments. Like sometimes I get architecture students or design students. I think that's wonderful because they bring a very different perspective for all of my students. I mean, first of all, I'm inspired by your Grupo Pesquisa. Man, I would love to create something similar to that. We've had, and I've been a part of various salons. So this is quite common. There have been various people that organize salons for the digital art community. There's one called Lisa, Leaders in Software and Art, that I gave presentations maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Now there's Hyphen Hub. So there's a few people that are really good at organizing. And it's even quite casual. Okay, the salon tonight is in this person's house, and then people show up, and one person presents, but we're having some drinks, some food. So this is really important, I think, for community building. In New York, I don't think we have similar research groups like what you have. Uh, it's more casual, it's more artists, people working, and we're just hanging out. It's not really a formal conference. Um, Obviously, in other parts of the United States, there's academic conferences that are focused on this. Obviously, ICEA, SIGGRAPH, many world famous conferences. But especially in New York, I think it's much more casual. It's more of a social community, and I think that's been great. I think we could do more, certainly. In New York, everyone is tired. Everyone works a lot. Everyone's trying to pay rent, right? So unfortunately, sometimes people don't have time just for community building because you really have to work hard to try that extra bit, I think. I think most of my so there might be a difference between my undergraduate students, the bachelor students, my graduate students, the masters, and even my pre-college students that are in high school. I can see a difference there. So let's say my bachelor students, most of them, even though they chose this program, they have no idea what it is. And they always tell me, like, oh, my friend in industrial design or my roommate in industrial design, she keeps asking me, like, what the hell are you guys doing in art and technology? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like they have a hard time describing what they do. So I give them credit that they had an instinct, a desire, and they followed that instinct. I mean, I think even if you want to tell your parents about jobs, right? I think art and technology will be more important for industry in the future also. That's not our focus. Um, so when students come in, I always try to, maybe students have not decided on their program yet, let's say. At Pratt, first year students do foundation and they start their chosen program, their major in their second year, and they're with that program second, third, fourth year, and they graduate after 4 years. So I started doing these open house events for foundation students. Maybe they have not decided yet. So I have all of my students help. Okay, let's bring all of these like foundation students into our department and show them what this is. And usually they're like, whoa, I had no idea. It's not a thing that people know about. Definitely, they're trying to explain to their parents what program they want to do. They have to explain to their parents, and their parents have to say, okay, that's cool. So there's kind of levels, again, levels of translation that are a little bit hard to explain what art technology is because it's so new, because we are forming what it is right now. It's not formed yet. Um, Once in a while, I'm able to kind of steal a student from, like maybe I have one of my art technology students, their roommate is in printmaking or design or something, and they show them all the work and they think it's cool, and then they kind of come into my class also, right? So I'm happy to steal people from other departments sometimes. Um, like was that? I feel like that was your question, right? Oh, but the job, the experimental side of things. So getting the students, maintaining their experimental focus, experimental attitude. Usually, when they get close to graduation, they start to get a little nervous. They start to think about jobs and things like that. Like, I need an internship. Um, this happens more often, I think, with my master's students, where they're working on a thesis project all year. You're supposed to be very, very focused on your thesis project, but maybe they're actually focusing on applying for jobs, they're doing internships for jobs. There's just, I would say, there's pervasive anxiety amongst young people, especially because tuition is very expensive in general in the United States, especially with a private school like Pratt. Um, so I would never tell someone you must be an artist. I think it's a crazy lifestyle. You have to embrace that lifestyle. You have to be open to maybe being poor a little bit until you figure something else out. Um, if I wasn't doing this, I would just go crazy, right? Like you have to feel compelled and obsessed with doing this, and then you'll just do it. And then it doesn't matter what the world tells you, that you're always an artist. The world can't tell you that you're not an artist. So it's just you and your work is the most important connection, and you have to figure out a way to support yourself through that. Um, so if a student was having a crisis of anxiety, I would maybe say this, right? Like, think about your connection with your work. Like, that's the most important thing. What makes you happy? Find any way you can to keep doing that, keep growing. And unfortunately, right, you have to pay rent. You have to pay for healthcare in the United States. Um, that's something you just have to figure out. Hopefully, good luck. I'll help you if I can, but yeah, it's kind of good news and scary news at the same time. I would say in the last 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, it has become much more prevalent uh, with things like real-time software like Touch Designer, like Unreal Engine and Unity becoming more popular and easier to use, people like me are using 3D models, 3D animations more. I remember when I was a college student, I took 1 year of a class in Maya, which is professional 3D software, right? But it was a class focusing on a virtual reality environment. My professor was part of the art school, but also the computer science department. So it was learning Maya, but it was like low poly. It was not the type of Maya that people learn to do big 3D animations. And I enjoyed it, but after that 1 year, I did not do anything else with Maya because I realized for me there was a fork in the road. I could choose to do 3D stuff or I could choose to do everything else that I was doing because the 3D was so demanding to learn everything. It's just, the learning curve is very steep, right? Very high. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that. And I think probably for me, it was maybe in COVID, maybe around 5 years ago, I had a little extra time looking at tutorials. Um, I started incorporating that more. Platforms like Touch Designer can now handle 3D models in real time much better than they used to. Previously, 3D models, because of the way the computer has to process it on the CPU instead of the GPU, it required a very, very heavy system, and it was really hard to do that just for performance computation. Nowadays, it's easier. Um, I see a lot of my students that are learning Blender on their own. They're really curious about Blender. Definitely, a lot of students are using Unity and Unreal. Uh, I think we've all been very impressed with the rendering capability of Unreal, and it can talk to things like Touch Designer very well, I think. Uh, so I've seen maybe two paths. For students in the game arts program, they're more focused on Unity. I think for game people, that's more popular. And for visual people, like really people focus on the visual aesthetics, Unreal Engine has been more popular because the rendering engine is so good. Things just look really, really good with Unreal. Um, so I've seen that much more. I've been trying to learn more, right? I've been trying to learn Unreal the past year, also Unity, and incorporating that into my work with Touch Designer. I and a lot of my students have been working a lot more with like, scanners like Polycam, using apps on iPhone to like, scan things, import the model, clean it up in Blender, use it in various projects or applications. Um, I think there's potential for more collaboration with like 3D people. Um, I think the difficulty is, especially in my department, the mindset is completely different. Where my students are kind of open, they're artists, they're interested in philosophy and expressing their artistic vision, and also they want to learn technology, right? And maybe the 3D side of things, it's like industry focused. I have to learn this technique. I have to learn Maya because I need a job, right? And um, some of the work is really great still. They usually make short films. But to be honest, a lot of the times the films seem like copies of just a kind of Pixar, whatever, a cute character and some little story. Okay. So I'm not super interested in that, but it makes it harder for collaboration, I think, because the mindset is very different. Professionally, I would love to work with some 3D artists, but also it's difficult to do collaborations because they they tend to get paid pretty good money if they're doing freelance work. Um, Again, they feel pressure if they're also doing art stuff and also their work stuff that takes time away. There's always a kind of tension, I think. I see that as a problem of just anxiety about the industry that has built a wall between possible collaborations. But at least for me and my students, I could see that we want to use those tools. Definitely Blender is great. Like another example, our 3D program, they're not allowed to learn Blender, right? They must learn Maya because that's what the industry uses. Even though Maya costs a lot of money, Blender is free. So when these students graduate, they know Maya really well, but then are they going to pay for Maya until they get a job or something, right? It's my students, they're like, give me Blender, right? So everything we use is open source, free software. Really, the only thing that I use that's not free is Ableton Live. That's the only program. I mean, I pay for Touch Designer because the education version gives you more capability, but you don't have to, right? You can get the free version and do almost everything with that. I have experimented with AI. Starting, I think it was 2021 is when Midjourney and Dolly first were released. I was curious to use them as part of a larger creative workflow. For me, just writing the prompts and getting an output image at first, that was exciting for a few days, and then I got bored pretty quickly. So I wanted to experiment, like how could I use that and then have those generated images be a part of something larger. So I did some projects. I gave a lecture here about that. Generating images to create a kind of 360 texture for virtual environments. Doing some works more conceptually. I felt there's an interesting tension between AI as a type of technology created by humans, but in itself almost a form of nature almost. So I was looking at the concept of bonsai trees. They're a type of nature, it's a type of tree, but it's due to human intervention, it has been shaped in a certain way. So you could also say it's a type of technology at the same time. So I collaborated with a friend, writing a text and doing an AI generated video where we created AI bonsai, but then talking about these issues of layers of nature and technology and humans involved with all of that. Um, After those projects, about a year later, I looked back at them and I felt they looked very dated already. It just seemed so uncool because the technology progressed so quickly. And I could look at that image and that looks like Dali from 2021. I can tell, like, this is from 2021, like, oh, this is from 2022. Okay. And I don't like this idea that something can be so dated and old so quickly. So I started thinking about a way to use AI that would be more timeless. And I wasn't sure how to do that until one day there was a lecture at Pratt's. I think this was maybe October of 2023, maybe. A mathematician that was talking about the processes inside machine learning models, inside AI. And he talked about an algorithm called gradient descent that was actually invented in the 1800s, so almost 200 years ago. This kind of a simple algorithm made by a French mathematician that is at the core of a lot of machine learning models today, deep neural network models. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. If this algorithm is so old, but it's still so important, maybe I could figure it out. Maybe I could recreate that algorithm to create some sort of images or sounds. And then I'm not using Midjourney or Dali or ChatGPT, which is a kind of black box, which we can't tell what's inside the model really. Like you just input a prompt and you get an image out, right? I was never very excited about that, but I started work on this project trying to recreate the actual gradient descent algorithm in Touch Designer, processing images and sounds and data in various ways in order to try to create something that was more timeless. Um, So it's about AI and it's using the techniques of AI, but in a very different way. So I worked on that for maybe 4 months, and I'm not a mathematician. Obviously, I'm not. I like math. I'm kind of a math nerd. So I like learning math. And so I was really interested. I talked to my colleague in the math department at Pratt, and I was like, "Is what I'm doing, is that actually gradient descent? Like, what is this?" And he looked at it and he said, "Okay, yeah." Gave me some advice. Um, I think I kind of hit the wall, and I got very tired because it was very difficult work for a little while, and I felt like I needed to give that a rest, do something else for a while, and that was a year ago. That was a year ago. I haven't really looked at it again, but I will. So for me, usually projects can take a long time. It's an iterative process. So I started, maybe I'll do it again. Hopefully, someday I will have a project about this, and it will be timeless, and uh, I don't have to feel that anxiety, which I felt with my earlier AI projects. Oh, this thing just came out. Oh, I have to make a project now. I have to be before other people because then it's important if you're quick, right? And maybe online you get more likes, you get more clout, you get more notice. Um, but I think that should not be a part of your creative process, that type of anxiety, right? I say take your time. So for me, I've kept it a little bit over there. I use it more for coding now, for help with coding. I've been using a combination of ChatGPT and I like DeepSeek also right now. I like the DeepSeek R1. You can see the reasoning of the system, which I think is kind of cool, and it remembers what I asked it for last time. So I've actually been able to figure out some things in Unity and Unreal just using that, especially for things like I've been trying to use Unreal and Unity for VR development. And online, it's actually been very hard to find information because it's so new. But somehow I ask some of these AI systems and then try it, and then it's worked for me. It's just been very difficult to find information on forums written by humans sometimes. So for that, I've enjoyed it. I will continue to use it for that. I don't really care to use it for anything actually creative because I don't know, it's fun for me. Like why would I want to give the fun part over to something else? Like I want to do the fun part. Um, and also I don't really like the quality of the images, even the videos that are generated now or sounds. I just don't really like the quality of it. So for me, the process is more important. And if it can help me with the process, then cool. I think in my process, like I was saying, it's if it can help me, if I need to maybe translate one thing to another thing, like, oh, I have this thing that worked in Python, but I'm using Unity now. I have to translate it to C sharp script. That helps, right? So that's an active translation. Um, I've used things like Stream Diffusion TD, which is a tool in Touch Designer. It uses a stable diffusion algorithm, which is a popular generative AI algorithm for creating images. But it allows you to do real-time generation in Touch Designer, which is really great. So you can have inputs, video coming in, the system, you write a prompt, and then the system can create an image from that. And so I've experimented with audio reactive generative AI things with that. So sound comes in, it affects, maybe the sound affects the prompt in different ways or affects, some visual quality of the AI generated image. Um, those have been experiments more for my students that were interested and for my YouTube channel. I was not interested to make that my own work. I don't feel it's still not cooked enough. It feels a little bit raw for me. Um, So we'll see. I would like to see the details, right? So you're talking about like the book I made. We're trying investigating different types of binary code, ternary codes, alphanumeric codes, language to using the game Go, right? Uh, Arrangements of black and white and space stones on the board. So I love this idea of types of code functioning like a symbolic language. I want to see the details. Like, I think for me, like God is in the details. So I get annoyed by the black box nature of it. For me, typing a prompt is not enjoyable. Seeing the output is not enjoyable. So why, right now I feel, why would I do that? Like I'm not having fun with this. I'm impressed, definitely. Definitely impressed, definitely scared for like political implications that are possible with that. Um, I think that's why with the gradient descent project, trying to take that and then kind of open up the black box, figure out what's inside, like that's more interesting for me. So I've not used it for planning lessons or doing curriculum. I'm not completely against it, but I feel in general, when you're using AI tools, it's going to give you an average response. And you can imagine if every art school or every art and technology program was all using ChatGPT to help plan their curriculum, then everything is going to be this sort of average, just similar to each other, right? So I think it's important to identify what your strengths are, be unique. So me working with my colleagues and my students, I think it's more important that it's harder to think of curriculum without using that. But I don't think it's a good idea to do that right now. Um, with my students, we've done assignments like experiments in class, similar to in the United States. There's a children's book called Mad Libs, which is like a fun game you do with your friends. It's like a story, and there's little blank spots in the story, and you say, okay, give me for number one, give me a noun. And you just say a noun. Give me an adjective. You write down an adjective. Give me a verb. You write down a verb. So you don't know the story, but you are completing the story. And so then you read the story with the words that you selected, and it's stupid and funny. If you're 8 years old, it's very funny. So I've done some like Mad Libs experiments with AI with my students where we insert both texts and then use that as a prompt for creating visual experiments or sound experiments. Um, some way to use that text-based prompt just as a fun activity that doesn't have too much weight to it. It's just kind of a more casual thing. In general, in my department, again, there's a split between the different programs. My students in art and technology are curious. They are all learning the tools. They don't love it. It's okay. They're using it for some things. It's really common for proposals. So usually our students, especially for senior projects for the bachelor students and the thesis project for the master students, they have to present their proposal for their final project to, the entire department is there, all the professors are there, and we give feedback, we give critique. So it has become fairly common for students to use like a storyboard, or okay, this is my idea for my thesis project, and they use AI. Um, that I feel like is okay. But I've tried, and my colleagues have tried to start a policy where students put a little icon in the corner of the image that makes it very clear that that's AI, like the little star sparkly icon emoji, right? Just because in these type of meetings, if I'm seeing a proposal from a student, was this a previous work that you made? Was this another artist's work? Sometimes it's unclear, and usually we don't have a lot of time. And so just seeing the little icon is helpful, I think. Okay, so we know immediately, okay, this was an AI image you generated for the proposal. It just makes the conversation more clear. So I definitely support even anything that's online. I would support a movement for everyone to put a little watermark on AI generated images, videos, sounds. That's not happening yet. Um, so that's my students. I think, they're interested but ambivalent. Like, it's okay. The other students, especially game arts and 3D animation, are very, very, very against generative AI. There was a generative AI workshop series last year that a professor was giving. Just some basic techniques for Blender, basic techniques for 2D animation, just an introduction to AI tools. And a lot of the animation and game art students kind of revolted, and they put up posters and like complaining, like, why would you teach us tools that are going to steal our jobs? This is bullshit. Um, Posting articles about, which I loved. There's a video from Hayao Miyazaki, the Ghibli director, right? Who is absolutely against it. I completely support his stance. If you haven't seen it, the video is great where one of his employees is showing new tests that he made with AI, and Miyazaki just said, like, whoever made this has never had a feeling, doesn't have any empathy. It was a brutal critique session. It was just terrible for this other guy. And it's a really interesting video, I think. And I support his stance. Um, so then these animation and game art students provoked a symposium for our department where all day long we had people come in, we talked about all of these issues, students could bring issues and make statements. And I think that was a really great, healthy thing for us to do. The conflict is basically even the professors in 3D animation and game arts, many of them said, like, well, I feel like it's our responsibility to at least teach you these things. You should be aware of these tools. It's going to affect the entire industry, whether we teach you or not. So it's important. Um, so that was one argument. And of course, another argument would be, these models are built on plagiarism. There's definitely a moral argument to be had for like stealing other artists' work. So I thought it was a really great symposium, and all the students were very eloquent in their complaints about this. It's just things are moving so quickly now with everything, right? So I think we need to make space for those type of conversations. I do think we should be using it and teaching it. I do think it's important, even though creatively I'm not super excited to use it myself, and many of my students aren't super excited. It's still important though. I think anything that would be showing in a professional setting takes a critical stance, like not just using it for an output, but then building some larger conceptual framework around that process. Like you guys are saying, like highlighting a certain aspect of the model, uh, doing a critique on some aspects of the entire process. That's the type of work that I think is actually being shown in a public setting. Um, I don't have any connections with the entertainment industry, but I think probably already in the cinema industry, it's already being used for storyboard artists, uh, for news magazines, for news websites, probably illustrations of articles. I'm sure a lot of illustrators have been put out of work because of that. Um, the community now in New York, I would say they're interested. There's a handful of people that are building tools. For example, I'm forgetting his name now. There's an artist that built the Stream Diffusion TD plugin. Lyle, his name is. Dot Simulates is his handle. He has a Patreon and a YouTube channel. So he's coming more from, he had a background more in the computer science end of things. So I feel like there's people maybe not on the art side of the art and technology community that have more skills to be able to create these tools, package it in a way on GitHub so people can download it, do the proper, just the proper packaging of that type of thing. And a lot of people have started to use those things. Another one, Josef Pels, I think he's based in Austria or Germany, has created really great tools for Touch Designer. Again, like coming more from the computer science side of things, I appreciate them as tools for me as an artist. Um, but I do still think that even within a kind of community, there is still a divide of, okay, we're art and technology, but okay, you're definitely more on the technology sides, you're more on the art sides, right? It's nice that we're all talking, but you can still kind of see the difference. I think it's important for us all to be experimenting together. Um, but still, like those tools that those people have made, like for me, I have no interest to just automatically use them and show something. Like it's taken me a while. I need to cook it for a while, right? So it's slow cook and then figure out what's going to come out for my own creative practice from that. So I think it's a different environment. So here the PhD program has an important role. It seems like you guys are really well integrated. Is my perspective on that, which is amazing. In most art schools in the United States, there is no PhD program. Obviously, in maybe larger state-funded public research institutions, like state universities, there would be a PhD program, but not in the art department at all. It might be art history, certainly, much more PhD programs. Um, so I think in the US, there's more of an expectation to to do your practice. So studio practice is very, very important. Um, so in the US, I think if you're an artist, if you are kind of famous, if you're having good shows and getting well known because of your artwork, then even if you suck as a teacher, to be honest, you could be hired as a professor. Um, it's not required. We never received training in teaching. Like I told you, when I was a grad student, my only experience was teaching English in Japan for 2 years, and my professor said, "Go ahead, teach this class," which I did for 2 years with no training, right, on how to do that, right? Um, so it seems a little bit crazy, right? And now at Pratt, it's gotten great. We have an organization called CTL, Center for Teaching and Learning, that gives us pedagogy workshops, and there's much more conversation between teachers and departments. So advice I would give for someone is you don't have to present yourself as overly academic, I think, for more of an art environment. I think that's great. If you've published papers, that's great. But equally important, and I think more important, would be showing that you have an active professional practice as an artist. So I think focusing on that is very important. Um, in typical academia, if you're in a science department or a literature department, philosophy department, it's common that you have to publish papers. You have to publish books, publish research, and then that will enable you to be promoted, to get tenure, right, to get job security. And in other schools, like maybe in schools, I've seen tension where there might be a tenure review committee. So this might be a committee, like let's say a professor has been full time for 5 or 6 years. They apply for tenure, which will give them permanent job security, which is amazing. In my school at Pratt, it's a committee of my peers in my department, and then a committee of my peers at the school level, and then a committee at the larger institute level. But it's always composed of other professors that also do art, that do design. In other larger schools, other universities maybe, these committees might be composed of professors not in an art department. So there has been tension in the United States sometimes with, okay, this professor is a literature professor or a philosopher or in science, and then this person in the art department does not have a PhD, never published a paper in any journal whatsoever. Maybe they have an active professional art career. So there has to be a kind of translation to these other professors that, okay, these type of exhibitions, this counts as a paper in the Journal of Nature, right? So it's hard to translate how great every line on your resume is, because with other fields, maybe it doesn't translate. So I would say, be aware of those relationships, but ultimately, uh, creative practice, professional art career is the most important thing. Well, my experience here is amazing. I've loved it very much. Very different, even though everyone mostly speaks English, right? Trying to conduct some lectures in half Portuguese, broken Portuguese. Um, so I've loved it. I felt like the students have all been very animated. I've had lots of questions every lesson, every talk that I've given. So I think it's amazing. Um, Comparing it, I mean, every place is different, I guess, right? Um, at Pratt, I've had every year it could be different, really. You know, this year, wow, an amazing group of students. Next year, they don't talk, they don't do anything. Like, what are you guys doing? Right? I have to work much harder to get something out of them. I think so. I'm just trying to observe dynamics amongst my students. If there are one or two people in the class that are really outgoing, that helps a lot. So if they talk to other students, they get the energy going, and then everyone's energy just comes up, and it's much better. Sometimes if there's not that one or two students to help the energy, then it's a lot harder on me. So perhaps it's not even about Brazil and New York and wherever. I think personalities of groups can change. Um, Everyone behaves differently depending on the group that they're with, right? I have lots of students from China, especially some Korea, some Japanese, but like, lots of Chinese students. Um, yeah, they tend to be a little more quiet. I need to pull things out of them more. I think they're absolutely capable once they come out of their shell a little bit. I've done workshops, like remote workshops for students in China, like focusing on things like touch designer. Um, that's a little bit harder. I enjoy that too, but even with my American students, like back in COVID, for example, it's hard to speak up in a group in a Zoom meeting, right? Like everyone's face is right there. It's a little bit awkward, right? If we're in a room together, it's easier. Like we can have individual conversations. Um, so when I'm doing a workshop with Chinese students over Zoom, usually all of their cameras are off. Very few of them would speak during the meeting. So I try some techniques, but that is more about me just giving a lesson, and there's not as much feedback. Um, so I have to change, depending on where I'm at. And when I was teaching 6-year-olds in Japan, it was like I'm like foreign monkey, tall with blue eyes, and they just want to climb on me and do head, shoulders, knees, toes. So you kind of understand your audience, which I did that for 2 years, and I was like, I cannot sing head, shoulders, knees, toes one more time. I'm done. I'm done. No more. But just knowing your audience, trying to understand what they need. Everyone needs luck, but you have to prepare yourself for good luck to happen, right? So it's really about working all the time. When you meet someone that perhaps can give you an opportunity, you're ready for it, right? So combination, I would say, of just cultivating the relationship with your work, take it very seriously, work all the time, um, cultivate your community. Like your friends are going to be the ones to help you out. Trying to think of all the many opportunities that I've received are because a friend helped me or a friend introduced me to this person. There's always some sort of a social connection. Um, I would say the majority of good things that have happened to me in my career are because some friend of mine was involved in the process somehow. And then I was ready for that good luck to, to do something, right? This has been great. This time in Brazil, I've been going to shows all the time, seeing a lot of things. Typically in New York, right? I don't really go out to openings very often these days. Um, I don't go to as many experimental music shows as I used to. Unfortunately, as I've gotten a little bit older, right, there's just not time between life, work, family, job, my own creative practice. There's a lot of roles that you need to play. But I think especially as a young person, just going out, being out there is so important. Even if you're tired, showing your face at an event, say hi to people, and then you can leave, right? So just maybe a little, Chazin. Um, I think that's really important just because when people make decisions about like, okay, I want to organize a show, most people are lazy, actually. Even really intelligent curators, really intelligent like artists, anyone that's trying to form a community, they could be really smart and have good intentions, but if they just saw you last week, like you're in their mind, you're like, oh, okay, I'm going to invite that person for this opportunity, right? Because they're lazy. Everyone is lazy, right? If they haven't seen you for a year, they have no idea, are you still an artist? Like, would you want to do this, right? So there's a lot of question marks, and people just want to make life easier for themselves. And so if they saw you at that show, they already know, okay, like, oh, they're still doing this thing, cool. It makes life easier for them. So I just recommend the social networking is earlier in your career. It's 50% really of just getting the ball rolling, getting opportunities to start. Um, for me, I'm thinking about right when I graduated from grad school, I think there is a period of time, maybe 1 or 2 years, where the world actually wants to help you. They're like, "Oh, you just finished school, great!" Like, and they'll be more likely to give you shows, to give you opportunities if you're being active in a community. So I would say take advantage of that. Like, really work hard, just show your face, go to everything, form your own community of people, form your own shows. I definitely a lot of the opportunities I've had were just because other friends that are artists, not curators or gallery people or museum people, decided to like start a series of events, and we just started doing shows and organizing our own thing, right? Much more casual. But then, in that sense, it was my friend Jomar Statkun formed this platform called This Red Door. That was really amazing. Um, we did it a few times in New York. We did it in Hamburg, Germany, and it was just when that was happening for a month, every night we were just going to the venue and curating shows, having music shows, doing stuff. So I would say if you have a group of friends and you're doing something, the gatekeepers, the curators, other like so-called important people out there, they're going to feel jealous actually. If you have a kind of like hip, young community of people doing something and like maybe they're not allowed, right? So suddenly like, oh, can I like, do something with your platform? So you've kind of flipped the power dynamic a little bit. So I'd say, however you can flip that power dynamic, that's important. Um, my friends and I, for a while, we've figured out, we noticed if you're ever at an art show and you're talking to someone like important, and if you start to talk about your own work, they kind of like it's kind of like annoying. Like they feel like you're desperate, that you want to like show your work to them, and they're just whatever. They're out. But if you're talking about someone else's work, they're interested. So then it's like, oh, I'm gonna talk about my friend's work. Like, oh, you got to know this. Oh, this guy, he's doing this sculpture that's really great. You definitely have to look into that. And because I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about someone else's work. They're interested because most curators, they are really interested to discover new artists, but it's a little bit annoying, like if I'm just talking about my own work, right? Trying to get something. So be aware of the power dynamics. Help your friends, talk about your friends, form a community, show your face, and then just keep making, keep working. Look up Instagram is Invisible Signal is my handle. Definitely subscribe to my YouTube channel. I have almost 100 tutorials on there, mostly focusing on Touch Designer, but also other digital tools that I've done with my students. I just started a Patreon, which will have some more exclusive, more actual like asset downloads related to my YouTube channel. Bandcamp, so as a musician, I go by Russian Arc Sakura. So look up Bandcamp Russian Arc Sakura. And is that it? I mean, website, BlakeMarquesCarrington.com has a little bit more, just more info on all of my projects. And as usual, I decided to code that myself 10 years ago, and now it's just kind of a pain in the butt for me to update it. So the Instagram is usually the most up to date, the experiments and things I'm doing, and the website shows some more in depth information about works that might take a little bit longer to update.